worn by men. It consists of vest, jacket, very popular style today among working women, you know, and a dress resembling a coat and reaching about halfway from the hip to the knee. So in those days, the coat was a little longer. It was about down here. Today, the women have it up here. This dress I have opposed from what has been shown to me as in harmony with the word of God, while the other I have recommended as modest, comfortable, and convenient and helpful. She was describing the new dress where it was not as long as the old one. Not a pants now. A dress that reaches down to about the ankle and not brushing the streets and so forth. So she was very specific, brethren. And so there is no need for any doubt. What you do with the message is up to you and God. But that was her teaching, which I mentioned last night. So I've touched wedding rings, I've touched pants, I've touched, okay, let me touch now the wigs. Yes, brother. Go ahead. Yes. 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 Why is our church then following this posture and not sticking to what the same reason, brother, why Israel of old fell into apostasy. The messages that God gave them, the messages that God sent to them were ignored. And even the leaders themselves became part of the trend for disregarding God's counsel. And so I can't fix it and pad it and nice it up. The truth of the matter is that over the years, slowly but surely, and that's how the enemy works, the standards of God's church, the Adventist church from when it started 100 and odd years ago to where it is now, we have slackened off our seriousness in terms of following the standards. And so what has happened is over the years, what used to happen, I remember as a boy growing up, the wedding ring thing was where after the wedding ceremony, even those who chose to wear it, coming to your sister, those who chose to wear the wedding band, where it was put on after the wedding ceremony finished, and you're going home, you slip it on your wife's hand. That's what I hear as a boy growing up. Because it was just not part of Adventist culture. That's not the old-time religion. Slowly but surely, it became more popular to have it in the ceremony itself. So the pastor asks you for it and you put it on. And I even see blessing of the ring in some wedding ceremonies. And brethren, what can I say? That's not the Adventist way. I can't tell you that, okay, based on my opinion, that was Ellen White's time, this is now a different time. I have to just tell you what the messenger says and leave it to each individual to decide for himself. Brethren, I can tell you this. When I was growing up as a boy, I used to hear of many people who, when they discovered this truth from Ellen White, they went home and got rid of their wedding rings. They preferred to make it to the kingdom than risking their salvation for one little piece of metal. The Bible says, in your ignorance, God winks. But when you get the knowledge, he calls you to repentance. Brethren, I'm coming to you. I believe that this revival in Adventism, because of the attack against Ellen White, is not just about defending her, It is wake-up time for this church. And so I can't do nothing else but just tell you what God said and leave it to you. I'm not just here to say, well, brethren, Andre Hill was wrong about Ellen White, and then when we go home, we are defending Ellen White's message about our life, now line up with it. So what would it benefit us anyway? We're up a hell with the same people who are criticizing and tear us down because we're not living the life of the message that we are defending. It make any sense to you? I don't think so. Yes, we have another question. Go ahead, sister. Yes, it's best to use the mic because we have taping with the cameras.
Just to wrap up what you said with the wedding band.
Yes.
While I was in the States for some years,
yes,
my status in terms of job allows me to be supervising.
Yes.
And I had a group of my staff, well, the staff, not mine, And I was talking to them, and the business of the ring, I said, Miss. And she looked and she said, no, Miss Johnson, I am Mrs. And I said to her, but I don't see any ring.
Yes.
These were not Seventh-day Adventists when I discovered.
Yes.
It was 2 of them. And they said, Miss Johnson, we do not have to wear a wedding band to prove to anyone that we're married. Because when anyone comes along, another man,
Yes.
all I have to say to them, I am a married woman. And these were not Seventh-day Adventists now.
Right.
So I think we should take a page out of these people's book. And
No
we have the
comments.
truth
I
and
won't
messing
add
and
to that.
playing around as if, we are in the playground. Have
Yes.
mercy, Lord.
May I say this, brethren, to close on this issue? I don't want to spend any more time on the wedding ring because I have about 3 other more issues before I close. And I don't want to send you home too late. Let me close with this, brethren. Did you know that the wearing of wedding rings was not found, cannot be found anywhere in the Bible? Do you know that it was not a custom among God's people of Israel? Do you know that even in the parable where Jesus spoke about the prodigal son and a ring was put on his finger in terms of to show his authority in the family and so forth, that was just a parable. It's not a signal to say go wear a ring. The same way Jesus in Jeremiah, I think God described his church, his lovely church, as the Eastern bride who decketh herself in her ornaments. And she's ready for her husband. That's not a signal that they must go put on ornaments. God says he treats his people like how the eagle treats his young ones. It don't mean so you must go put on feathers and be like a bird. It's an illustration. So the point is, brethren, the question is then, if among God's people in Israel, all the way through to the New Testament, not one woman in the apostolic church wore a wedding band. Not one. It was not part of their custom. It's a Roman, have mercy. The history shows, brethren, that it is a Roman Catholic custom that was passed on to all of the Protestant churches that broke away from the mother church. And God is saying to his people, come out of her. Not just literally, but spiritually, brethren. Time to go back to basics. I think I need to move on. Any other new question? Or you want me to touch the other issues I have here? Or the wigs. The wigs. That's an interesting one. Simply put, brethren, in the time of Ellen White, and I have done the research, and here's what the research shows. In the time of Ellen White, wig wearing was not just by women. Men used to wear wigs too. It was a part of the European culture that came over into America. Because Americans were actually the kids which were, they were kicked out from England. And the Pilgrim Fathers left England to escape persecution, went over into America and started the colony there. So many of the customs from England went over. And that is why today, brethren, if you notice, if you go to court, you'll see some judges in their ceremonial wigs. It's part of the culture at the time. And so in America at the time of Ellen White, the wearing of wigs was a fashionable thing for both men and women, but more so at that time as it developed into the period of the 1800s. It was a fashion for women to wear big, heavy wigs. And in those days, the wigs were massive. And they were built out of material that we don't use today. Many of these wigs, the way they were built, it is said that insects and all kind of parasites lived in the wigs. Oh yes. Because I did the research. And it was found out from the medical records of doctors at the time that the women who were wearing these massive, call them Stone Age wigs, if you want to call them that, they had all kind of infections and insects and whatever in them, which seemed to sometimes seep through the women's scalp into their brains, literal records, and cause women to literally have sicknesses and sometimes insanity from the wearing of these massive wigs at the time. Now, is Ellen White saying that wearing wigs today will cause insanity? No. Because the history shows that the way wigs are made today is totally different from what they were like in those days. And in addition to that, I could give you another example. Ellen White said in her time that you should take your bath before the Sabbath. Let me say those who have read that passage or read those counsels. Take your bath before the Sabbath. I know this one is going to be tricky for some of you. Should we? Yes? Coming to you. And does that mean that we shouldn't bathe today before the Sabbath? Or bathe Sabbath morning? No. So we need to be balanced in our thinking, brethren. Let me tell you how baths were taken in Ellen White's time. In Ellen White's time, there were no showers as we have today. People would bathe probably once per week. In fact, in her time coming just before that, people bathed once a month. And bathing was like a big job. Big tub, them big heavy metal tub. You know them, brethren. You see them in old movies and so. And you would have to put that tub and carry water from the well. Everybody didn't have no pipe in those days and so. And big bucket and come in and full up tub and sit in there. And in those days they never had all the fancy soaps and whatever we have today. So bathing was a job in itself in Ellen White's time. And so she counseled with all this kind of labor and so much effort to be connected with bathing at that time, it is best to take your bath before the Sabbath. So I suspect after they bathed, with all of that work to do, they would just wipe up and freshen up Sabbath morning. But in our time, brethren, let's be realistic. It's not a chore and a job anymore. We have all the fancy stuff. You know the fancy stuff I'm talking about. So a shower today would not be what would be Ellen White's time. And so her counsel there is in context. Just like the Wigs, in terms of creating insanity in that time. The Wigs today don't cause insanity at all. And bathing and in that time could not be applied to our time as well. So let's be practical and realistic. So that is easily answered. Let me now touch. There are two things I have left on my list, and then I'll take general questions as I wrap up. I have the matter of plagiarism, copying by Ellen White. And I have also the prediction that Jesus would have come in her time and didn't come. And of course, contradictions in her writings. Is there any question that somebody would like to ask or comment you'd like to make before I move on at this time? Yes, go ahead, brother. I would prefer the mic for the taping and so everybody can hear.
Are you suggesting then, Brother Gillespie, that the present type of wigs are okay?
Good question. Good question.
Yeah.
Good question.
And secondly, although these wigs are modern and easy to handle,
yes.
Many a times people are wearing wig because they believe that the quality of the hair that they have
good question.
is not good enough.
Good question. I will touch this one.
Yes. And secondly,
yes.
Not only the wig, but we see yellow hair, red hair, black hair,
pink
hair. So
yes.
Could you just...
All right. I'm not going to pretend that I have the answer to this one to satisfy everybody, because there's no specific counsel from Ellen White or in our writings as a church about this issue. But I've seen authors in the past. There's a famous author called Joe Cruz, Creeping Compromise. You know that little book? Many of you have it on your bookshelves at home. I have a copy. Creeping Compromise. And in it he describes and he used principles from Ellen White's time and applied them to the modern time. And here is how he argued it. He said it this way. If God says you shouldn't put on cosmetics because you should not be changing yourself to make yourself different from what he created you to be. As people of God, we should be proud of what he gave us. As people of God, we should recognize that if you're black, you're black. If your hair is kinky, kinky. If your hair was given to you as a certain race, that's it. The same way he says you shouldn't put on jewelry. This is the way Joe Cruz argued it. He said that the principle is that people of God must dress simply, modestly, and we should avoid any excess which make it seem that we are not satisfied with ourselves. And so I can't be the conscience for anybody. I'll just point out to you that this is how some brethren see it, where it is considered that the wearing of wigs, because I've heard it discussed in churches quite often over the years, that the wearing of wigs is an indication that you're not accepting that you're no longer a young girl and young boy. Or it's a disregard for the fact that God gave you a certain kind of hair, and you should be proud of it as an African or Negro. That's how some people see it. And so I am not going to say that there is specific counsel from Ellen White about it. I have not seen any. But there are general principles that we can follow. And in regards to the wearing of wigs, I've heard preachers over the years, they hit out against it, and they said, you know, our old men are dyeing their hair because they don't want to show the gray hair. And women wearing gray hair because they don't want to show that they are old. Wearing wigs rather because they don't want to show that they're old and whatever, and they speak strongly against it. I'm not going to pretend that I have something to quote to show you. I don't. But it is for you to think about. But I can tell you this. This much I can speak on. If somebody paint them hair red, green, pink, whatever, that one I can tell you that that person is confused. It's an identity crisis. That's my opinion. I'm not speaking not from the Lord. I'm speaking from myself. I think somebody who shave off eyebrow. My wife today was saying, my mother always talk about that too, but my wife was saying today, she can't understand how a woman would shave off her eyes, or her eyebrows, and then go take tattoo. I mean, tattooing is so common these days, you know. And the Bible speaks about tattooing, not tattooing. People of God should not tattoo. That include paint on false eyebrow too, because tattooing. And she can't understand how you would shave off and then paint in false one. It's an indication that you're not pleased with what God give you. That's my opinion now. This is not from the Lord. So it's up to you to do with it what you think. All right, so that is in terms of wearing of wigs.